Hi, I'm Scott Jones, and this is the Attuned Parent Podcast. If parenting your teen feels heavier than you expected, you're not alone. On this podcast, we talk about what's really happening underneath anxiety, defiance, shutdown, and family conflict, using attachment science, nervous system awareness, and practical tools that actually work. Because behavior is protective before it's problematic, and regulated parents increase influence. Let's get started. Today, we are asking a deeply uncomfortable question. What if your natural instinct to help the people you love is actually the exact thing keeping them stuck? What if your empathy, that profound desire to jump in and solve a crisis, has accidentally become a weapon they use against themselves? If you've ever felt trapped, working harder on someone's life than they are, you're going to find today's episode profoundly relevant. I'm going to start with something that may make you feel a little guilty, or some might feel relief about. Here it is. Your teenager might be using their pain as currency. Not consciously, not maliciously, but there is a pattern that develops in some teens, and I've seen it with a lot of them, where helplessness stops being a response to hard circumstances and starts becoming an identity, a strategy, a way of moving through the world that gets needs met without requiring any risk or effort. And we call this victim stance. Now, before you check out, because that sounds kind of harsh, stay with me. Because in this episode, it's not just about dismissing your child's pain. It's not about telling them to toughen up. It's not about saying they're just being dramatic. It is about understanding how real pain can calcify into patterns that actually keep them stuck, and what you can do about it without blowing up the relationship. So welcome to the Attuned Parent Podcast. If there is one episode that I want parents to share with other parents, this might be it, because victim stance is everywhere, and it is misunderstood. And the way most families handle it makes it worse. So let's get into it. Let me share an analogy that maybe will help clarify what we're talking about. Picture putting a heavy fiberglass cast on a broken arm. When the bone snaps, that is trauma, an intensely painful, entirely real injury. And immobilizing that arm in a cast is the absolute correct protective response. But consider the biology of what happens if you leave that cast on for 3 or 5 years. The bone itself may have knitted back together perfectly months ago, but the muscle tissue surrounding it completely atrophies from disuse. The cast, the very intervention meant to provide safety, creates a brand new self-imposed limitation. Now you literally can't use your arm. Not because the original break is still hurting you, but because you have been overprotecting it for so long. That's victim stance. So let's just kind of get clear with the language, because that word can feel pretty loaded. Victim stance is not the same as being victimized. Let me say that again. Real victimization is real. Real trauma is real. Real pain is real. If your teenager has been hurt by peers or by circumstances or by relationships, that matters, and it deserves to be taken seriously. Of course, we put the cast on the broken arm. Victim stance is what can happen after. It's when the victim identity, which may have started as an entirely accurate description of someone's experience, becomes an organizing principle of a person's sense of self. It's when I was hurt becomes I am helpless. When something happened to me becomes there's nothing I can do. The research on learned helplessness is really important here. What we know is when organisms, including humans, experience repeated situations where their actions have no effect on the outcome, they just stop trying. Even when the situation changes, even when agency becomes available, they don't reach for it because they've learned that reaching doesn't work. I once heard the story of elephants at a circus, and they would take baby elephants and uh, put a really heavy stake in the ground, and then they would have a chain around their leg that was attached to that stake in the ground. And every time the baby elephant would try to move, it would cause pain, and they weren't able to get away from that chain. The interesting thing is as the elephants matured and grew and got bigger, they never changed the size of the chain or the size of the stake. So a big adult elephant who could have easily pulled the stake out of the ground never did, because they learned as children that it caused pain and that they couldn't get away. So they just stopped trying. We see this in our kids all the time. That is the tragedy of victim stance. It often begins as an accurate read of a powerless situation, and then the nervous system generalizes it. And then, if the environment starts to reward the helplessness, it becomes really sticky. A diagnostic question that I use is, does this pattern of helplessness reduce over time, or does it deepen? In genuine grief, in genuine trauma, recovery, there is usually some support, some movement. There's a shift. But in victim stance, there isn't, because the pattern is doing something. It's working. And until we understand what it's doing, we can't address it or change it. So let's talk about 3 ways parents unintentionally make this worse. I want to spend some time here because this is where parents feel the most guilt. It's also where the most leverage is. If your child is in a victim stance pattern, I can say with near certainty that the people who love them most have, in their love, been part of sustaining that pattern. Not because you're bad parents, just because we're human beings and we don't like to watch the people that we love suffer. So here are the 3 things. Number 1, the over rescue. So let's say your daughter says she can't possibly do a project for school. It's just too hard and nothing ever works out for her. Why does she even try? So you stay up until midnight doing most of the work for her. She gets a decent grade, but then it's on to the next project, and that cycle just starts all over again. Over rescuing sends a message that is the opposite of what we intend. We think we are communicating, I love you and I'm here for you. But what we're really communicating is, you're right. You can't do this. Let me do it for you. Every time we step in before the struggle has had a chance to be instructive, we confirm the belief at the core of victim stance. I am not capable. The world is not navigable to me, and I'm just broken. The second way parents make it worse is the endless validation loop. Every time your son comes home from school with a grievance, the teacher is unfair. His friend was mean. Practice was brutal. It's too hard. And you validate it, you agree, you add your own outrage. Well, he feels seen in that moment, and he comes back tomorrow with another grievance, and that cycle continues. Validation is not the same as agreement. A teenager needs to feel heard. That's non-negotiable. But there is a version of validation that stops at the feeling and never moves towards agency, perspective taking, or possibly that the story has more than one side. Dan Siegel talks about the difference between co-regulating and co-suffering. We want to regulate with our kids, be a calm presence in their storm. We don't want to join them in the storm and make it bigger. That's co-suffering. It often feels like connection, but it actually deepens that sense that the world is dangerous and unfair, and I can't do it. Okay, number 3, lowering the expectation floor. Over time, you've quietly stopped expecting certain things. You don't ask him to do his chores because you know it'll just lead to a meltdown. You don't bring up the college conversation because she shuts down. You've built a life around managing their limitations rather than expecting more from them. This is one of the most insidious because it looks like accommodation and it feels like kindness. But expectation, the right kind of expectation, held warmly and confidently, is one of the most powerful messages you can send your child. It says, I see more in you than you currently see in yourself. I believe in a version of you that you haven't met yet. And when you continually lower the floor, we confirm that self-concept of failure. And that self-concept, I'm fragile, I'm limited, I can't, that's where victim stance lives. So now that you know the 3 traps we can get into as parents, what do we do? How do we hold genuine compassion for real pain while also not feeding a pattern that keeps our kids stuck? I want to give you a framework I call the ACE response. 3 moves that can happen in a single conversation or across many conversations. And ACE stands for acknowledge, connect, and expect. So acknowledge. We can see the real pain underneath the pattern. We name it without amplifying it. Something like, I can see this feels really hard. I'm not dismissing that. That acknowledgement has to be genuine. Your kids can feel the difference, and it has to be real. But once you've acknowledged that they're struggling and going through a hard time, we move on to connect. Stay in the relationship while holding the line. I'm not going anywhere, but I'm not doing this for you. The connection is what makes the next step possible. You can't hold a child accountable from a distance. You have to stay in the discomfort. And then E, expect. We hold a confident belief in their capacity. We're not demanding, we're not demeaning, we don't use shame, but we have a belief that I know this is hard, and I also know you can do hard things. I've seen it. So let me show you what this might sound like in a real life scenario. One we talked about earlier, the school project. So instead of staying up late to do the project, you say something like, I can hear that you're overwhelmed right now. That feeling is real, and I'm not going to dismiss it, but I'm also not going to do this for you. Not because I don't care, but because I do care. So let's sit together and figure out what's the first step. Just one step. I'm not going anywhere. That's an ACE response. You've acknowledged the situation, you've connected, and you're present. You're warm. You held the expectation without rescuing, without abandoning. Is this harder in the moment than it sounds? Yes. Would it be easier just to do the project for them? Yes, probably a lot of the times. But will it be met with resistance? Yeah, probably. But because the system is used to a rescue arriving, you have to break the cycle. When it doesn't, when that rescue doesn't come, the behavior frequently will intensify before it de-escalates. And that's not a failure. That's just a pattern testing whether the change is real. In those moments, you have to stay consistent and be steady. Let me give you just some signs, a distinction between genuine pain and a victim stance pattern. So in genuine pain, you'll often see that there is movement over time, even if it's slow. Your teen can access their agency in other areas. The pain is often specific and connected to real events. Validations and support tend to reduce their distress, and the teen responds to repair and connection. In a victim stance pattern, that pattern tends to deepen despite support. Helplessness generalizes across many different contexts. Increased accommodations leads to increase in demands and challenges to this narrative. If you challenge their victim stance, it produces strong resistance. So I want to be clear, these aren't mutually exclusive. A child can have genuine, real, serious pain and be in a victim stance pattern simultaneously. In fact, that's often the case. The pain is real, the pattern developed around the pain. Both are true, and both deserve a response. But I want to say something to those parents who have been walking around on eggshells, who quietly accommodate, you shrink away from the conflict. You're quietly hoping that one more act of patience will be just the thing that finally shifts it for your teen. Your patience is not the problem. Your love is not the problem. But there is a version of love that protects a child from difficulty rather than equipping them for it. That version, however well-intentioned, can become its own kind of harm. Richard Schwartz, who developed the internal family systems theory, he talks about the parts of a child that carry victim stance as doing a protective job. They learned that helplessness was the safest posture. Your job is not to attack that part or shame it or demand it disappear, but your job is to show your child consistently over time that they just no longer need that part of their protection. That there is someone in their corner who believes in them even when they don't believe in themselves. That is the most powerful thing a parent can do. Not rescue, not accommodation, but presence and belief. Expectations held with warmth. Your child doesn't need you to carry them. They just need you to believe out loud and consistently that they can carry themselves. So this week, I want to give you just one thing to notice, not to fix, but just notice. Watch for moments when you accommodate your child instead of expecting something from them. When you rescue instead of support. You don't have to change it yet. I just want you to see it. Awareness is always the first move. In our next episode, we're going to go to the root of what a lot of what we've been talking about this whole series. We're going to talk about attachment, what it is, what insecure attachment looks like, and what we can do as parents. Because I think that goes with this idea of our kids can do hard things. In order for that to happen, they have to feel attached to us, and we have to really know how to genuinely repair. Thanks for listening today. I hope that this struck a chord. If there's some things in today's message that maybe was a little uncomfortable to hear, I think that's good. Take a look at it. And if you think somebody else might benefit from hearing the same message, please share our podcast with anybody you think might need it. Again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.